Star Trek, Tribble-Nation, Road to the Stars. Prologue: The Scattering. Long before Kirk, long before the Federation, long before anyone thought of them as anything but a nuisance, the Tribbles had a homeworld. It was not a rich world. It had no valuable minerals, no strategic location, no beautiful landscapes that travelers came to see. It was a small, quiet planet on the edge of the galaxy, with soft grass, gentle rains, and skies that turned pink and gold at dusk. The Tribbles lived in burrows beneath the hills, in nests woven from dried grass in the hollows of ancient trees. They sang to each other across the valleys. They raised their young. They grew old. They died. They were not advanced. They had no technology, no spaceflight, no weapons. They did not need them. They had each other, and they had their songs, and they believed that the universe was a place of peace. But on their homeworld they had enemies. Reptilian predators, large, fast, hungry, hunted them without mercy. The predators stalked the grasslands, their scales dark against the green. Their eyes were cold. Their jaws were lined with teeth. They ate the babies, they ate the adults, they ate any Tribble they could find. The Tribbles could not fight back. They had no claws, no teeth, no venom. They had only their softness and their songs. So evolution found another way. Many. The Tribbles learned to reproduce faster than their predators could eat. A Tribble, safe in its burrow, could give birth to a litter of 10 every few hours. Exponentially, without end. Most would die, but enough would survive. That was the balance. The predators would eat, the Tribbles would multiply, and the circle would continue. For thousands of generations, this balance held. Then the merchants came. They came in sleek ships, drawn by rumors of a strange, soft creature that fit in the palm of a hand. They found baby Tribbles small, harmless, delightful, and thought they would make wonderful pets. The merchants did not understand the balance. They did not know about the predators. They did not know that the Tribbles' rapid reproduction was not a curse but a defense. They took the babies away from the homeworld. They took them to places where the predators did not exist, where the food was plentiful, where there were no claws, no teeth, no hunters in the dark. The babies grew, not in size, in number. Within weeks, merchant ships were overrun. Within months, cargo vessels had carried Tribbles to a dozen worlds. Within a year, the Tribbles were everywhere. They ate grain stores. They clogged life support systems. They got into the warp drives, soft, warm, hard to remove. Ships broke down. Colonies starved. The economy of entire sectors was thrown into chaos. The Tribbles did not mean to cause harm. They were simply being themselves. But the galaxy did not care about intentions. It cared about results. The Klingons were the first to declare them a pest. Not because the Tribbles attacked them. Not because the Tribbles insulted their honor. Because the Tribbles ate and kept eating and kept multiplying and would not stop. The Klingons, who prided themselves on their self-sufficiency, could not tolerate a creature that consumed without purpose, that multiplied without control, that had no place in the natural order of things. The first attack came from orbit. Ships appeared in the sky above the Tribbles' homeworld, dark, angular, bristling with weapons. The Tribbles had never seen anything like them. They gathered on the hillsides, staring up, wondering what these strange birds might be. The first shot turned the largest hill into a crater. The earth shook. The sky turned orange. The heat was so intense that the grass ignited before the fire even reached it. Tribbles screamed, not in battle, not in anger, but in pure, unfiltered terror. They had never known fear like this. They had never known that the universe could be so cruel. The Tribbles scattered. They ran on their small feet as fast as they could, but the bombs fell faster. The skies rained fire. The grass burned. The trees toppled. The burrows collapsed. Mothers called for their young. Fathers pushed their families into holes that were too small for them, sacrificing themselves so that others might live. The Klingons did not stop until the planet's surface was a smoking wasteland. Millions died. Millions more were buried under the rubble of their homes. The songs, the old songs, the songs of the first Tribbles, the songs that told the story of their world were silenced forever. But some escaped. They had no ships. They had no plan. They simply ran. They hid in the cargo holds of freighters that had been passing through the system. They burrowed into the walls of space stations. They clung to the underbellies of ships that carried grain and ore and passengers who never knew they were there. The Klingons hunted them, not because the Tribbles were dangerous, not because they posed a threat, because the Klingons believed that a pest deserved to be exterminated completely, totally, without mercy. Klingon warriors spoke of the great cleansing with pride. They hung the pelts of Tribbles on their walls as trophies. They taught their children that the Tribbles were not a species, they were an infestation. For years, decades, generations, the Tribbles drifted. They hid in grain silos on agricultural worlds. They burrowed into the walls of space stations. They clung to the underbellies of cargo ships, eating crumbs, shivering in the cold, singing softly to themselves so they would not forget who they were. No one helped them. No one cared. Until one man. Part 1, The Day Before the Stars. The wind over Sherman's planet was soft. It carried the scent of clover and honey, and the faint, distant salt of a sea that no Tribble had ever seen, but whose water they had learned to sing into clouds. The grass was tall and green, swaying in slow waves as if the planet itself was breathing. On the hillside where the first Tribble had once opened its eyes to a new world, a world given to them by a man in a starship, thousands of Tribbles had gathered. They were not the small, round, squeaking creatures from the old stories. Those Tribbles were gone, scattered to the winds, killed by the Klingons, forgotten by history. These Tribbles had grown. They had eyes large, dark, warm, filled with intelligence and memory. They had ears small, soft, twitching to catch the wind. They had mouths that could smile and speak in a language that sounded like wind chimes. They had hands small, delicate, with tiny fingers. And they had feet short, sturdy, covered in soft fur. They were fluffy. They were friendly. They were civilized. And today they were about to become a spacefaring species. In the center of the gathering stood the fluffy Horizon, the first warp-capable vessel ever built by Tribble hands. It was round, soft, with no sharp edges. Its windows were large and round, like the eyes of the creature that had dreamed it into existence. The hull was a warm, golden cream, and the warp nacelles pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light like a heartbeat. The crowd was silent, not afraid, not excited, attentive. On a platform at the edge of the field sat the queen. Her name was Elder Singer Amara. She was old, older than any living Tribble, older than the memory of Sherman's planet. Her fur was silver-white, streaked with patterns of gold that seemed to shift in the light. Her eyes were the color of honey, and they had seen more than any living being. The homeworld, the fire, the scattering, the hiding, the cold years of running, and the miracle of a second chance. She remembered Kirk, not the legend, not the captain, the man. She had been young, barely more than a kid, when his ship appeared in the sky above the ruined world where her family had been hiding. The Klingons had been hunting them for weeks. Her mother had been killed. Her siblings had been lost. She was alone. And then the Enterprise. She remembered the way his voice sounded over the speakers, calm, kind, firm. "This is Captain James T. Kirk of the United Federation of Planets. We're here to help." She had not understood the words, not then, but she understood the feeling of being seen. She remembered the way he knelt in the grass, not caring that his uniform would be stained, and extended his hand. She remembered the way he said, "It's okay. You're safe now." She remembered the way he looked at her, not with disgust, not with pity, but with respect. The Federation had gathered the scattered Tribbles from a dozen worlds, from cargo holds, from grain silos, from the dark corners of space stations where they had been hiding for generations. The Vulcans helped. The Andorians helped. Even the Klingons were ordered to stop the extermination, though they grumbled and spat and called it a waste of time. Kirk chose Sherman's planet himself. He stood on this very hillside. She remembered his silhouette against the setting sun and said, "This is your home now. No one will hurt you here." The Tribbles did not have a word for gratitude. They had a song. She sang it for him. He did not cry, but he was quiet for a long time afterward. He looked out over the valley, his hands clasped behind his back, and she wondered what he was thinking. Maybe he was thinking of all the other species the Federation had yet to find. Maybe he was thinking of his own home, far away. Maybe he was just tired. Now, decades later, she sat on her platform and watched her children prepare to leave the nest. The countdown. A young Tribble, silver-white, bright-eyed, with a voice that had not yet fully matured, stood beside the ship. His name was Trib-C. He was not a captain, he was not an engineer, he was just there, watching, learning, singing softly to himself. His small hands trembled, not from fear, from anticipation. He had dreamed of this moment since he was old enough to understand what the ships in the sky meant. He had listened to Singer C's stories of the first flight 100 times. He knew every detail, the hum of the warp core, the cold of space, the way the stars looked when there was no atmosphere to dim them. But knowing and being there were two different things. The countdown began, not with a clock. The Tribbles had no clocks. They measured time in songs. One song of greeting, called the Launch Coordinator. His voice was steady, but his fur was bristling with excitement. One song of hope, one song of farewell. The crowd sang. The first song was soft, tentative, the song of the homeworld, the one they had lost, the one they would never see again. We were born in fire. We were born in ash. The Klingons came, and our world turned black. But we survived. Some of the older Tribbles wept. Not loudly, Tribbles did not weep loudly, but their fur grew damp and their voices cracked and they held each other's hands. The second song was stronger, the song of Kirk, the song of the rescue, the song of the new home. Then came a ship, then came a voice. He gave us land, he gave us choice. He gave us hope. A young Tribble, barely more than a kid, asked his mother, "Who is Kirk?" She smiled and stroked his fur. "He was the one who saved us," she said. "Before you were born, before any of us were born, he was the first human who saw us as something more than pests." The third song was the loudest, the song of departure, the song of the future, the song of the stars. The space is cold, but we are warm. The space is silent, but we have our song. The space is vast, but we have each other. The ship's engines hummed, a low, warm vibration that matched the pitch of the crowd. The sound resonated in the chests of every Tribble on the hillside. It was the sound of their future. It was the sound of hope. The Queen raised her small hand. Her hand trembled just a little. She was old and her hand was not as steady as it had once been, but her voice was firm. "Go," she whispered. The ship rose, slowly at first, as if reluctant to leave the ground that had nurtured it. Then faster, then faster. The grass bent backward. The wind howled. The crowd shielded their eyes with their small, fluffy hands. Tribsy did not shield his eyes. He watched. He watched until the ship was just a point of light. He watched until the light vanished. And then silence. The sky was empty, but the song continued. Part 2, the first starflight. Space was cold. The crew of the Fluffy Horizon felt it even through the insulated hull, a cold that was not a temperature but a presence. The absence of air, the absence of sound, the absence of everything that had kept them alive for generations. But the ship was warm inside. Singer C, silver-white, bright-eyed, the ship's heart sang. Her voice filled the cabin, soft and steady, and the cold retreated. Not gone, but forgotten. Captain Flick's golden fur, calm voice activated the view screen. The stars were bright, the space was dark. The Federation border was visible, a shimmering line of buoys and sensors. Beyond it, the unknown. "Helm," he said, "take us out." The ship crossed the border. No alarms, no warnings, just the soft hum of the warp core and the steady breath of the crew. They were in open space. Alone, small, fluffy, and then a signal, Part 3, first contact. The signal was not a hailing frequency. It was not a greeting. It was a ping, a single, precise pulse of energy like a stone dropped into a still pond. Singer C stopped singing. "What is that?" asked First Officer Tiv. Her missing ear twitched, a nervous habit she had never been able to break. Captain Flix's fur bristled. "I don't know." The ping came again, closer this time. And then a ship emerged from behind a moon. It was sleek, elegant. Its hull was a pale, burnished bronze, and its lines were curved like the wings of a bird. It had no markings, no insignia, no registry, but its shape was unmistakable. "Vulcan," whispered Tiv. The ship hailed them. The screen flickered. A face appeared, pointed ears, dark hair cut in a severe line, eyes that were sharp, curious, and utterly unreadable. "This is the Vulcan survey vessel Tuvok," said the figure. "You have entered our sensor range. State your species and purpose." Captain Flick stepped forward. His small hands trembled, but his voice was steady. "We are Tribbles from Sherman's planet. This is our first voyage beyond our solar system. We come to explore, to learn, to—" He hesitated. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. He was not just speaking for himself. He was speaking for his entire species. Singer C touched his shoulder. "To sing," she finished. The Vulcan raised an eyebrow. Part 4, the meeting. The Vulcan's name was T-Varus. He was not a diplomat. He was a scientist, a xenobiologist, sent to study the strange, small creatures that had somehow built a warp ship. He had expected something else, something less fluffy, but he was Vulcan. He did not show surprise. Instead, he invited the Tribbles aboard his ship. The transfer was awkward. The airlock was not designed for creatures the size of small dogs. The corridors were too tall, the doors too wide, the lighting too bright. But the Tribbles adapted. They walked on their small feet, their tiny hands clasped behind their backs, their eyes wide, taking in everything. Singer C stayed close to Captain Flix, and then she saw him, a Vulcan standing at the end of the corridor. He was older than T-Varus, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes. He wore the blue of the science division, and in his hands he held a data tablet. His name was Spock. He had once served on the Enterprise. He had once stood beside Kirk. He had once, in a moment of weakness, of curiosity, of something he had never fully understood, petted a Tribble. He remembered it, the softness, the warmth, the way it had purred against his palm, vibrating with a frequency that seemed to calm his thoughts, the way its tiny heart beat against his fingers, the way it looked up at him with those large, dark eyes, not afraid, not demanding, just present. He had never told anyone. Now he watched the small, fluffy creatures walk through the corridors of the T-Vok, and for a moment he was young again. One of the Tribbles, an elder, not the captain, but one of the crew, stopped in front of him. It looked up. "You are Spock," it said. Spock raised an eyebrow. "I am. My aunt sang of you. You were on the Enterprise, you knew Kirk." Spock said nothing. The Tribble reached up with a small hand. Spock hesitated. Then he knelt. He extended his hand slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wild animal, and let the Tribble touch his fingers. The fur was soft. The warmth was real. "Yes," he said quietly, "I knew Kirk." The Tribble sang. Just one note, high, clear, pure. Spock closed his eyes. For a moment he was not on a survey vessel in the middle of nowhere. He was on the Enterprise. He was young. Kirk was laughing. McCoy was complaining. And somewhere in the corner of the recreation room a small, furry creature was purring. He opened his eyes. "Your people," he said, "are remarkable." He stood, he walked away, but he did not forget. Part 5, The Return. The first mission was short. The Tribbles did not find enemies. They did not find ancient artifacts. They found themselves reflected in the eyes of the Vulcans, who treated them not as pests but as equals. T-Varus filed his report. It was concise, logical, and ended with a single, uncharacteristic sentence. "The Tribbles are small, but they are not small-minded." He never explained what he meant. He didn't need to. The crew of the Fluffy Horizon returned to Sherman's planet as heroes. The Queen wept not from sadness but from joy. Singer C sang the story of the first contact, the Vulcan ship, the pointed ears, the strange, quiet man who had once petted a Tribble. Trib C listened. He was still young. He did not understand everything. But he understood this. The universe was not just cold and empty. It was full of beings who were curious, who were kind, who were different, and that was good. He decided in that moment that he would go to the stars, not just as a singer, not just as a passenger, but as something more. Part 6, The Years Between. The years passed. The grass grew and was cut and grew again. The Queen grew older, her fur more gold than silver. Singer C grew wiser, her voice deeper, her songs more complex. Trib C grew. His fur turned silver-white like Singer C's. His voice deepened. He learned to sing the old songs, the songs of Kirk, the songs of the first flight, the songs of the cold years before the traders came. He also learned to speak Federation standard. He learned to read not because the Tribbles had developed writing, but because he wanted to understand the visitors. He spent hours in the village's small library, a round, soft building filled with data tablets and books that the humans had brought as gifts. The other young Tribbles teased him sometimes. Why do you need to read? We have songs. He smiled and said, the songs tell us who we were. The books tell us who we might become. The visitors came. The Vulcans came first again. They walked slowly, deliberately, their hands clasped behind their backs. They carried data tablets and questions and a willingness to listen. They were patient. They never raised their voices. They never rushed. Then the humans came. They were louder than the Vulcans. They smiled more. They fidgeted. They asked questions that the Vulcans would never have asked. Can I pet you? What does your fur feel like? Do you like music? Tribble-C met a young human woman named Maria Torres. She was a xenolinguist. She studied how different species communicated. She knelt beside him, her red hair falling across her face, her eyes bright with curiosity. You speak, she said. We all speak. I didn't know that. The old records, they said you just squeaked. Tribble-C tilted his head. The old records are old. She laughed. The sound was strange, loud, sharp, but not unpleasant. Would you like to learn our songs? He asked. Yes, she said, very much. And so, for the first time, a human learned to sing a Tribble song. It was not good. Her voice cracked. Her pitch was wrong. The other Tribbles giggled, a soft, tinkling sound like wind chimes. But she tried. She kept trying. She sang until her throat was sore and her ears were ringing. Tribble-C decided that he liked humans. Part 7. The Klingon Objection. Not everyone was happy about the Tribbles' growing relationship with the Federation. The Klingon Empire, still bitter about being ordered to stop the extermination, sent a delegation to Sherman's planet. They came in a dark, angular ship that looked nothing like the sleek Vulcan vessels or the friendly human freighters. The ship bristled with weapons, and its hull was scarred from countless battles. The Klingon ambassador was a massive, scarred warrior named General K-Vog. He refused to step onto the grass. He stood on the ramp of his ship, his arms crossed, his eyes narrow. You cannot be serious, he said. These creatures are not worthy of Federation membership. They are pests. They are food. They are nothing. The Queen sat on her platform, her fur silver-white, her eyes calm. You killed our homeworld, she said. You killed millions of us, and still we survived. K-Vog spat on the ground. A mistake we will correct. The human ambassador, a calm, patient woman named Ambassador Vance, stepped forward. General, the Federation has made its decision. The Tribbles are under our protection. Any act of aggression against them will be treated as an act of aggression against the Federation itself. K-Vog stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back into his ship. The ramp rose, the ship lifted. It disappeared into the sky. The Tribbles sang a soft song of relief. Tribble-C watched the ship vanish. He did not feel victorious. He felt tired. He asked Singer C, will they ever stop hating us? She looked at him with her old, honey-colored eyes. Perhaps not, she said. But that is not our problem. Our problem is to live, to grow, to sing. Let them hate. We have better things to do. Part 8. The Doubt. The years passed. Tribble-C studied. He learned mathematics from the Vulcans, long, patient hours of equations and proofs. He learned history from the humans, stories of wars and peace, of heroes and villains, of mistakes and forgiveness. He learned ethics from the Andorians, the importance of community, the weight of responsibility. He learned to pilot a shuttle. He crashed the simulator 17 times before he got it right. On the 18th try, his hands did not tremble. On the 19th, he landed without a single warning light. The instructor, a Vulcan woman named Tirina, said, adequate. He knew that was high praise, but at night, alone in his small, round house, he doubted. The house was quiet, the wind was still. The stars shone through the window, cold and distant. What if I am not good enough, he thought. What if the humans laugh at me? What if the Vulcans think I am illogical? What if the Klingons are right? He thought of Kirk. Kirk had doubted too. Kirk had failed. Kirk had been wrong, but Kirk had kept going. He thought of Singer C. She had been afraid before the first flight. She had told him once, "Fear is not the enemy. Fear is the messenger. It tells you that something matters." He thought of the Queen. She had seen her homeworld destroyed. She had seen her people scattered. She had seen the Klingons hunt them like animals. And still she had not given up. If they could keep going, he thought, so can I. He sat up. He looked at the stars. He began to sing softly at first, then louder. The song of Kirk, the song of the first flight, the song of hope. He sang until the sun rose. Part 9: The Decision. The day the Federation voted to accept the Tribbles as members was not a day of celebration. It was a day of quiet singing. The Queen sat on her platform. The elders gathered around her. Singer C stood at the front, her voice high and clear, singing the song of acceptance, a song that had no words, only a melody that rose and fell like the tide. The Federation delegates stood in a row. The Vulcans stood still. The humans fidgeted. The Andorians shifted from foot to foot. The Klingons were not invited, but they all listened. Trib-C sang too. He sang for the future. He sang for Kirk. He sang for his mother, who had held him on her lap when the first ship landed. He sang for Maria, who had laughed when her voice cracked. He sang for Tuvok, who had told him the truth. He sang for Spock, who had not forgotten the softness of Tribble fur. When the song ended, the Queen spoke. "We are no longer alone," she said. "We have always had each other. Now we have the stars." The Federation delegates applauded, a strange, sharp sound that the Tribbles did not understand at first. But they learned. Trib-C looked up at the sky. The stars were bright. He knew what he had to do. Part 10: The Dream. That night Trib-C sat with Singer C. They were alone in her house, a round, soft building on the edge of the village with windows that looked out over the grass. The moon was full, casting silver light on the floor. The wind was still. "I want to go to the academy," he said. Singer C was silent for a long moment. "You are not old enough." "I will be." "You are not strong enough." "I will become." "You are not ready." He looked at her. "Then help me become ready." Singer C opened her eyes. They were wet. "I will," she said, "but you must promise me something." "Anything." "You will not forget who you are. You will not forget where you come from. You will not forget the songs." Trib-C placed his small hand on hers. "I will sing them every day," he said, "even if no one listens." Singer C nodded. "Then go," she said, "and make us proud." Part 11: The Preparation. The years that followed were hard. Singer C taught him the old songs, the ones that had not been sung in generations. The song of the first winter, the song of the lost ones, the song of Kirk. He learned them all. He sang them every night. He also learned to fight not with weapons but with his voice. He learned to sing so loudly that the glass trembled. He learned to sing so softly that the listener had to lean in to pay attention to listen. He learned that the greatest weapon was not volume but clarity. And he learned that the greatest strength was not physical power but presence. But there was another lesson, one that no one taught him. He had to learn it himself. One night he sat alone on the hillside. The stars were bright. The wind was cold. He thought of Earth. He thought of the academy. He thought of all the beings he would meet, beings who had never seen a Tribble before, who might laugh at him, who might fear him, who might hate him. He thought of the Klingons. He thought of the homeworld lost forever, and he wept. Not loudly. Tribbles did not weep loudly. But his fur grew damp and his small body shook, and he sang a song that had no words, a song of grief, of loss, of longing. Singer C found him there. She did not speak. She sat beside him. She waited. When his tears stopped, she said, "Now you are ready." "I was not ready before." "You were determined. Now you are humble. There is a difference." He looked at her. "I am afraid," he said. "Good," she said. Fear means you understand what you are risking. Courage means you go anyway. She touched his cheek with her small hand. You are ready, Tribble. Go and make us proud. Part 12. The Departure. The day Tribble left Sherman's planet, the sky was clear. The grass was green. The wind was soft. The Queen sat on her platform, older now, her fur more gold than silver, but her eyes still bright. Singer C stood beside her. She was old too, her voice not as strong as it had been, but her presence still powerful. The entire village had gathered. Thousands of Tribbles, young and old, stood on the hillside. They did not speak. They did not move. They waited. Tribble walked to the shuttle, a small, Federation-built vessel that would take him to Earth. It was silver and sleek, with round windows and soft lighting. It looked like a sleeping animal. He turned back one last time. I will sing for you, he said. The Queen nodded. We will listen. Singer C raised her hand. Go, she whispered. Tribble boarded the shuttle. The engines hummed, the ramp rose, the door sealed, the shuttle lifted, the grass bent, the wind howled. The crowd began to sing the song of departure, the song of hope, the song of return. Tribble watched through the window. His village grew smaller, the hills grew smaller, the planet grew smaller, and then the stars. They filled the window like scattered diamonds, each one a sun, each one a world, each one a story waiting to be told. He was not afraid, he was ready. Part 13. The Academy. The shuttle landed on Earth. The ramp descended. The air was warm, humid, smelling of grass and flowers and something else, something that might have been history. Tribble stepped out onto the parade ground. The Academy towers gleamed in the sunlight, tall, silver, reflecting the sky. The flag snapped in the wind, the Delta shield, the olive branches, the stars. The grass was green, impossibly green, watered by hidden sprinklers that hissed softly in the morning light. Cadets stood in loose formation, humans, Vulcans, Andorians, Tellarites, creatures he had never seen before. They stared at him. He was the first Tribble they had ever seen. He was small. He was fluffy. He was silver-white. He looked up at the sky, at the stars that Kirk had once explored, and he smiled. Then he began to sing. Not loudly, just a note. A single, clear, high note, the note of greeting, the note of hope, the note of a new beginning. The cadets stopped staring. They listened. The note hung in the air, vibrating, shimmering, fading. And somewhere in an office high above the parade ground, Admiral Catherine Janeway watched through her window. Her coffee was warm. She almost smiled. Part 14. The First Friend. The cadets dispersed. The crowd melted away. The parade ground emptied. Tribble stood alone. He had expected this. He had prepared for it, but knowing and feeling were two different things. He sat down on the grass. The blades were soft beneath him, cool and damp with morning dew. He looked at the towers, at the flag, at the sky. You're the Tribble, right? A voice, human, female, young, he turned. A cadet stood behind her. She was tall, much taller than him, with dark skin and dark eyes and short, practical hair. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled as if she had slept in it. Her hands were stuffed in her pockets. My name is Kira, she said. I'm a first year like you. I am Tribble, he said. She nodded. I saw you sing. Yes. It was beautiful. He looked at her. Her face was serious, but her eyes were kind. Thank you, he said. She sat down beside him. The grass rustled. You're going to need friends here, she said. It's not easy being the first of anything. I know. I'm not the first Bajoran at the Academy, but sometimes it feels like it. He looked at her. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the sky. Then we can be the first together, he said. She turned. She looked at him, then she smiled. Yeah, she said, we can. And somewhere not far away, a young man with messy hair and a mischievous grin was watching them. His name was Marcus Cole. He was human. He did not know it yet, but these two, the Bajoran and the Tribble, would become his family. He walked over to them. Hey, he said, Room for one more. Kira looked up at him. You're the one who reprogrammed the replicators. Allegedly. She almost smiled. Sit down. Marcus sat. The grass was damp, but he didn't seem to care. He looked at Trib-C. You sing, he said. Yes. That's cool. Trib-C did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The three of them sat on the grass, looking up at the sky. The stars were still there. They always would be. Part 15. Janeway's window. And somewhere, in an office high above the parade ground, Admiral Catherine Janeway watched through her window. The window was large, floor to ceiling, a wall of transparent aluminum that looked out over the parade ground, the bay, the golden hills of San Francisco. The late afternoon sun cast long, warm streaks through the glass, painting the gray walls of her office in shades of soft gold. She stood as she had stood so many times before. The coffee cup in her hand was no longer scalding hot, but not yet cold. Just right. The steam rose slowly, curling into the still air. Down on the parade ground, the new cadets, she had seen them all arrive. The humans, the Vulcans, the Andorians, young faces full of awe or fear or both. But today was different. A Tribble. She had read the files. She knew he was coming, but knowing and seeing were two different things. He was small, silver-white. He sat on the grass in front of the main building, his small hands resting quietly in his lap. He was singing, not loudly. Just a note, high, clear, pure. The other cadets stared, some giggled, some stepped back. He kept singing. Janeway raised the cup to her lips. The coffee was warm. She drank. She did not smile, not really. But the corners of her mouth twitched, just a little, just for a moment. Well done, little one, she whispered, almost inaudibly. Welcome home. She set down the cup. She turned from the window. On her desk lay the new training schedules, the duty rosters, the reports waiting for her signature. She sat down. She worked. But the moment remained. The end.